to me, I don't fear Alex Jones. Like, I'm not afraid of the crazy neighborhood person on the street yelling out crazy things. I'm not scared of that person doing that online either. Hey guys, welcome back to the Base Politics Podcast. I'm Hannah Cox with Brad Polumbo. This week, Alex Jones is back on Twitter. A dangerous expansion of the surveillance state is on the table in Congress. And do men not have any friends? Let's jump in. So, Brad, I'm going to let you kick off our first subject. I have not been following this all that closely, but I did see that the notorious Alex Jones has been granted permission to come back on Twitter, now called X, and it seems like he has taken them up on the offer.
He has, unlike former President Donald Trump, who still hasn't really used his account since it was restored. But just for some background, folks, Alex Jones is probably one of the most divisive and hated figures on the internet. He is, far right's not even the right word, but just like extremely conspiracy theory, Looney Tune, occasionally correct, but more often than not wrong and spouts wild stuff. And he has a show, a network called InfoWars, hosts a show. I mean, Trump used to listen to him. He used to be more influential. And then he was mass purged in 2018 from all the social media networks, in coordination, some of them at least. And now Elon Musk, the new owner of Twitter, aka X, has decided to reinstate him, and it's sparking some controversy. So take a listen to this news clip breaking down the situation.
Host and conspiracy theorist Alex Jones has returned to the social media platform X. Owner Elon Musk restored the account after he posted a poll yesterday asking users whether or not to reinstate Jones. It ended with more than 70% in the poll voting yes. Nearly 2 million people participated. Jones repeatedly has called the Sandy Hook shooting a hoax. He was banned from what was then Twitter in 2018 for breaching the site's rules and for abusive behavior.
So as we'll get into, I'm actually supportive of this decision, even though I do consider Alex Jones to be a very distasteful figure as a question of free speech, right? But I will say this, Elon Musk made this decision, at least in part, by doing a poll on Twitter where he asked users whether he should reinstate Alex Jones on this platform. And then it says Vox Populi, Vox Dei, which I think that means the will of the people it will be or something. And 70% of people, almost 2 million people voted, and 70% voted yes. And so then Musk tweeted, "The people have spoken, and so it shall be." I don't know about you, Hannah, but on questions of free speech, it shouldn't really be up for a vote, A. B, this is not a real poll. It's not a legitimate or serious poll whatsoever. And C, it doesn't really seem like a way a massive corporation should be making its decisions to me. Do you have thoughts on that?
Yeah, my thoughts are Twitter is like pure anarchy at this point. It's just truly whatever Elon wants goes. There's no like guiding principles or lights or even business sense, it really seems, for what he's doing over there. And listen, I'm still having a great time on Twitter. No complaints, really. But I do worry about its long-term viability due to this kind of just erratic way of governing. I am a free speech absolutist. I'm not in favor of deplatforming people, as I've said ad nauseum, and will continue to say. I think better speech can always trump vile speech. I think that is largely what has happened with Alex Jones. This isn't somebody that the vast majority of people take seriously. He's seen as a kook, as a conspiracy theorist. He's really mostly known for pretty much attacking the families of Sandy Hook victims and claiming that they were frauds and hoaxers and actors, and he lost a major lawsuit on those grounds. And so to me, I don't fear Alex Jones. Like, I'm not afraid of the crazy neighborhood person on the street yelling out crazy things. I'm not scared of that person doing that online either. So I mean, I guess as a whole, I think this is a positive. But yeah, the way that Elon went about this is just sort of bizarre.
Yeah, it is bizarre. And we'll get into the Sandy Hook thing, trust me. I want to, before we discuss why we agree with this decision, I want to present people with the opposing argument. So here is Piers Morgan, who I'm generally as a fan of, but I think as a Brit, he just has a different perspective on free speech. Here's him making the case for why he thinks that this is wrong and Alex Jones should not be allowed on Twitter. Take a listen.
Well, I'm a passionate defender of free speech. There's a massive clue in the name of this show, uncensored. And I believe in it. I believe that all honestly held opinions, however offensive they are, belong in the open, where they can be challenged, debated, and exposed. But there are limits on free speech. There are laws, and there is a line. I've always said that Alex Jones is a perfect example of where that line got crossed. He's a conspiracy theorist and shock jock in America who made hundreds of millions of dollars by peddling outrageous lies that the Sandy Hook school massacre shooting was a hoax. To see him back on X selling his book, his merchandise, his website, his info wars, frankly, makes me want to puke. Every opinion should be heard, but inciting harassment and violence to profit from unspeakable grief, to pour into the wounds of those families yet more misery and pain, that's not free speech. It's deliberate hate speech, and it's disgusting.
So, Hannah, his argument seems to me to boil down to two things, kind of. One is that free speech has its limits, and Alex Jones is such a uniquely distasteful and vile figure in Piers's view that he's got to be past the line. The second is that Alex Jones has not just engaged in free speech, but he's actually engaged in defamation, including against, like you said, the families of Sandy Hook shooting survivors who he lied about and implied and openly suggested were crisis actors. And he was actually sued and lost over that. So, yeah, what do you make of those two arguments?
Well, I think that he did defame people, and he lost a lawsuit over it, and he now has to spend a lot of money, although I think he's tried to file bankruptcy. I'm not sure where we're at with that whole saga, but he was ordered to pay these victims a lot of money. There are limits to free speech, and usually when they occur, there is a court case waiting. And so I think that we saw the system work as intended to in this scenario. And I guess my question would be, if you deplatform him and he can't sell his book or make money off views, how's he going to pay those families, right? And that's sort of the problem here, is when you have this end goal of somebody said something terrible and so you want to cancel them, it's, you don't really leave any room for redemption or restitution in that scenario. Because I think if you are to exile somebody to prevent them from working, to completely ostracize them from society, what incentive is there for them to turn back on the views that you want them to give up? What hope is there for them to make any progress or to hopefully lead people that they've been leading astray back towards some kind of truth? I also think when the courts work as they should and there's some kind of restitution granted to victims, if your solution is to prevent these people from ever working or being seen again, then they have no way of making restitution. So what's your solution then? You want to spend taxpayer dollars to jail them? You want to spend money, $30,000 a year, to incarcerate this person? That doesn't do anything for the victims. That doesn't actually enable them to pay back their debt. So there's just not a lot of logic, I think, in these kinds of stances to me. He seems to draw the line at inciting violence. And I think that both in the US and in the UK, we have that same standard. I don't know that what you could do, I don't know that you could say what Alex Jones did was inciting violence. I certainly do know that his audience took to trolling and harassing these people. I'm not familiar enough about what he said or what was done on his program, if that's just something that his listeners took upon themselves or if he actually called on them to do that. That would probably be the line, I would guess, to whether or not he actually incited any kind of violence or harassment. So I can't totally speak to that, but I will say, I'm not surprised at the vitriol from his audience towards these people because Sandy Hook is something that really scared the right. And it was a heinous, awful, tragic event on its face, of course. But I think the nature of it, because you had such small children who were targets of this violence, people really felt like, and I remember when it happened, they really felt like that was going to be it for the Second Amendment. I mean, there was this perception like this would be the event that was so horrible and awful and such a terrible thing to have to even wrap your mind around happening that people would willfully give up the Second Amendment, or at least a lot of the components around it. And so I think you've seen a lot of people operating in fear for some time around that incident and story. And so if you start telling people, oh, this was a hoax, these people were crisis actors, it was all meant to stir up this kind of, pushback and to try to take away your rights, that is going to rile a certain group of people up and make them start to act crazy trying to defend their Second Amendment rights. So I think understanding the context of that is important. But again, I don't know if he actually crossed the line in pushing people to take those kinds of actions, or if that was kind of already in the water amongst the people who listened to him, and him alleging that this was crisis actors just made them push them over the edge and they took it upon themselves to do that.
Yeah, so what I would say about that is that I'm not sure he used Twitter to do those things. He might have promoted it a little bit, but that was mainly stuff he said on his show. And so for Twitter to give someone a lifetime ban based on content that wasn't original to their platform seems not how content moderation really works. Typically, Twitter is suspending an account for something they've posted to Twitter, not things happening elsewhere. And then two, I think this is defamation or incitement of violence have, specific thresholds as an exception to free speech under the First Amendment, and they are illegal forms of speech. But if a post meets those exceptions, that to me is cause to take down the post, not to ban the user for life, which is what Twitter originally did. And so I think you can enforce those exceptions on any future posts that Alex Jones does. The other point I want to make is that Twitter has a really great feature called community notes. And Alex Jones, if he posts this kind of insane conspiracy crap in the future, will get fact-checked in real time, and his audience of millions will see the truth attached to his tweets. And let me ask you all this. The last few years, it's not as if Alex Jones has been silent. He's been making his content on Infowars.com, and his most diehard supporters have all been going there and seeing his stuff that he's been saying. Now, on X, they will see his stuff, and they'll see it fact-checked and rebutted. I think that's better. I think the answer to bad speech is more speech, not censorship, not lifetime bans. And I think that you can have a free speech ethos on Twitter while still taking down unlawful speech and not banning people just because they're the most distasteful or most extreme, which is the other part of what Piers seems to suggest. And that doesn't actually work. I warned all the way back in 2018 when Alex Jones was banned. This is a slippery slope because he was one of the first major figures to be banned from everything, right? Within a matter of months, he was banned from Facebook, YouTube, Twitter, Instagram. The other ones I can't think of right now, gone. He was deplatformed almost entirely from the digital square in what, at least to my knowledge, unprecedented move. And it started with Alex Jones, and everyone defended it by saying, but he's the craziest. He's the biggest nut job. He's the most toxic. And I said, if we accept this, it won't stop with Alex Jones. Now, in the years since 2018, what have we seen? We've seen a sitting president of the United States digitally deplatformed from all the major platforms in Donald Trump in January of 2021. We've seen sitting U.S. senators like Rand Paul have their speeches on the Senate floor taken down and censored by big tech companies. We've seen massive newspapers like the New York Post throttled and deleted, or throttled and censored from massive big tech platforms for reporting that turned out to be true. And in the case of Rand Paul, he was saying stuff on the Senate floor that also largely turned out to be true. So it didn't stop at Alex Jones. So that's why I kind of reject the premise of Piers Morgan's argument where he says, well, Alex Jones, I believe in free speech, but Alex Jones is just too far. Well, the test of free speech is whether you allow it in the most vile cases, right? If you say, yes, but not for the worst of the worst. Well, guess what, folks? People disagree on that. So the left-wing academic Noam Chomsky, he famously said, if you believe in freedom of speech, you believe for freedom of speech for views you don't like. Goebbels was in favor of freedom of speech for the views he liked, referring to the famous Nazi official. So was Stalin. If you're in favor of freedom of speech, that means you're in favor of freedom of speech precisely for views you despise. And that's where I ultimately land on this Alex Jones question, that Elon said he would allow all legal speech on Twitter, now X, and with the exception of any individual posts that might violate the law, that standard has to apply to everyone, even the most distasteful commentators and conspiracy theorists, or it doesn't exist as a standard at all. Because once you start drawing lines like that, it can be drawn in different places, and different people have different perceptions about what's hateful and what's beyond the pale and what's not, what's a conspiracy theory and what's the truth in some cases. Once in a while, they get something right. So that's where I ultimately land on all of this. And I view the permitting people like Alex Jones to exist on the internet is a necessary consequence of having digital platforms be open cultures of free speech.
Yeah, and I do want to make this distinction because I think it absolutely does matter. The government has to give free speech. These private companies do not have to. I do think it is in all of our best interest if they do. I think a culture that supports free speech is one that we should always be striving towards. But there are still free market and freedom of association considerations here. And I don't have a legal problem with Alex Jones being banned. I do think what Elon is doing, though, is a better approach to combating bad speech. I think you're absolutely right about the community notes feature. That's not something that was around when he was initially banned. And we didn't see the former owners of Twitter trying to find ways of handling bad speech in a way that they could still uphold the spirit of it while also not allowing their platforms to be used in ways that were harmful to them, both financially or reputationally. So I want to applaud Elon on this, but I also do want to be really careful in making sure that we always note that distinction, right? How platforms are going to moderate their content is a personal decision. And Elon has said he wants to uphold free speech on his. He has not always done that perfectly by any means, but he does seem to be striving towards it more so than other platforms. And I think that that's commendable. But content moderation is a tough job. And we even see that he's struggling pretty mightily with this right now. He's been attacked by many more left-wing organizations. He's had many advertisers who have pulled out of advertising on X, I think unjustly, but they're saying because there's more hateful content on Twitter as compared to other platforms, and they don't want their ads running next to it. And so it really is a difficult thing to navigate as a business owner versus as a government official, where you never have a permission or excuse to come in and moderate content or denounce somebody's free speech or try to persecute them or cancel them. So I do want us to be careful in thinking through that when we discuss these things. But otherwise, I entirely agree with your points. And I know you agree with the difference in the legality as well.
Yeah, I, of course, don't think Twitter has any legal obligation to host Alex Jones. I just think it's the right thing to do if your statement is that Twitter is going to be a platform for the free and open exchange of ideas, which is what they've set it up to be. Same way like CNN doesn't have to host crazy people as guests. But if you're going to say our social media platform is where people are going to be free to discuss things, you can't say, well, then only some things. That's not really how that works. So it's a question of what's prudent and what's right. It's not a question of legality. They certainly have the legal right to ban Alex Jones all they want.
Hey guys, Hannah here with some big exciting news. We are producing so much content at Base Politics that we decided to make a separate YouTube channel just for this show. So take a quick minute and go subscribe to the new Base Politics YouTube channel. We'll put the link in our show notes. We'd love to see you there. Well, while Twitter does have the right to decide how they want to moderate their content and how they want to navigate our civil liberties, Congress should not have the right to negotiate that. But it appears that the Fourth Amendment is yet again on the table. There are two competing bills going on right now, both brought forward by Republicans, but they are competing from different factions, looking at reforming Section 702 of FISA. I want to roll this clip to get us started from Senator Mike Lee, who is a privacy proponent. And this is an interview he did with Glenn Greenwald recently discussing the bad bill that's on the table. And then we'll parse through the differences in the other one that is under consideration.
Okay, so the House Intelligence Committee bill, the HIPSI, as we call that committee, is doubly bad. Number one, it extends out the authorization period for FISA 702 by 9 years. To my knowledge, we've never had an authorization for FISA that long. Number two, it does so without any generally applicable warrant requirement. It purports to have a warrant requirement for a narrow subset of backdoor searches on American citizens, but they've written it in such a way that it would have practically zero effect. It wouldn't really have any practical effect because they can always get around this very narrow type of search where it's focused exclusively on evidence of a crime with nothing having to do with an actual national security investigation. But it's so much worse than that. The third big problem with the HPSI bill, and this is the granddaddy of them all, is found in Section 504 of the HPSI bill. In Section 504, this would vastly magnify the domestic surveillance capability and the ability of our intelligence gathering agencies to collect warrantless surveillance on American citizens without probable cause in the United States by expanding the reach of 702 into things like public Wi-Fi's at hotels, restaurants, coffee shops, bookstores, anything like that. All of a sudden, the intelligence gathering agencies could go to those entities that offer public Wi-Fi service, demand without a warrant all the data that crossed through those public Wi-Fi stations. And they could do that without ever going to court, without ever having to demonstrate probable cause or otherwise going through the steps of acquiring a warrant. This is bad. They're claiming that they're fixing the problem, and they're actually making the problem worse. And this is appalling. This is why this bill is something I've been describing as a Trojan horse, appropriately so, and it needs to be dismissed as such.
So, Brad, just to de-densify the subject matters, I know it can get into the weeds pretty quickly. I want to reiterate that the bad bill is being put forth by the House Intelligence Committee. And as Senator Mike Lee said, they are claiming that this is to reform Section 702 of FISA, which most people have come to hate. But in reality, it's an expansion of that provision. So it was actually scheduled for a floor vote today, which is Tuesday, but it has ended up being punted because Republicans could not agree on which bill, this one or the House Judiciary bill that's competing with it, should move forward. So I'm going to get to the good bill in a minute, but this isn't going away. People need to be on guard. It's probably coming back in the next couple of weeks, maybe even sooner. So if you're concerned about this, you do need to be contacting your House representatives because I think this is Mayday. Other people like Edward Snowden, Elizabeth Goitein from the Brennan Center, Glenn Greenwald, they're calling this the largest expansion of the surveillance state inside the United States since the Patriot Act. They're basically saying that in this bill, it's a seemingly innocuous change to the definition of electronic service communications providers. What that does is the bill actually vastly expands the universe of U.S. businesses that can be conscripted to aid the government conducting surveillance. And Elizabeth Goitein, who's with the Brennan Center again, she said under current law, the government can compel companies that have direct access to communications, such as phone, email, or text messaging service providers to assist in Section 702 surveillance by turning over the communications. But under this new provision, which is Section 504 of the House Intelligence Committee's bill, any entity that has access to, quote, quote, equipment on which communications may be transmitted or stored, such as an ordinary router, is fair game. What does that mean in practice? It's simple. Hotels, libraries, coffee shops, and other places that offer Wi-Fi to their customers could be forced to serve as surrogate spies. They could be required to configure their systems to ensure that they can provide the government access to entire streams of communication. Even a repair person who comes to fix the Wi-Fi in your home would meet the revised definition. That person is an employee of a service provider who has access to equipment, your router, on which communications are transmitted. While the bill's sponsors deny that Section 504 is intended to sweep so broadly, what is the provision intended to do and how is the government planning to use it is the main point we should be asking. At the end of the day, though, the government's claimed intent matters very little. What matters is what the provision on its face actually allows, because as we all know by now, the government will interpret and apply the law as broadly as it can get away with. And she goes on to note that one of the FISA court amici actually posted a blog to warn Americans about this provision. She said, I can't overstate how unusual it is for FISA court and MHI to take to the airwaves in this manner. So there's multiple people, even unusual allies, who are ringing the alarm about this. So I'll toss it to you for your thoughts before we get into the competing bill.
Yeah, it's just disturbing because FISA, right, the Foreign Intelligence Services Act, is supposed to be about spying on foreigners, not on Americans. But from its inception, it has been used to spy on Americans, as we've seen, including even members of the Trump campaign. But so this is something we see in privacy a lot, the matter of privacy law and what the government does, this third-party issue. Because if the government wanted to search your home, they have to get a warrant and show probable cause. But there's this third-party doctrine that if you're, it's a phone company or someone else is holding your data, they can search it without a warrant if the company agrees to it. And so it sounds like they're trying to put that on steroids and say that, oh, well, the government can't come search your phone, but we can ask Starbucks for your data without a warrant and get it from them to see everywhere you went on the internet. It's like, all right, so we're basically just doing an end round around the Fourth Amendment, around the whole idea of probable cause and getting a warrant before searching. So it's like I would respect them more if they just openly were arguing, we need to abolish the Fourth Amendment. You shouldn't have to get a warrant. We just need to be able to search people whenever we want. But instead, they're doing this really pernicious thing, at least it seems to me, where they're trying to pretend that they're keeping the protections for civil liberties in place while actually creating even more workarounds so that they can violate them and effectively render them non-existent while they remain on paper, which seems to me exponentially more sinister than even just infringing people's rights and being upfront about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we already know, thanks to Snowden's revelations and whistleblowing a number of years ago, that they are spying on Americans en masse. They are collecting a crazy amount of data on us, and yet it's not enough, right? We already have the world's largest prison population. We already convict thousands of people wrongfully, but that's not good enough. They need to go even further in spying on people and trying to get evidence that they can use against you in court. This is insanity. This is major police state territory. I think it's really concerning. According to reporting by The Intercept, they say that the Intelligence Committee's bill is being quietly supported by the White House and, shocker, senior intelligence community officials. They go on to say the House Judiciary Committee, meanwhile, free from the influence wielded by spy agencies over the Intelligence Committee, has advanced a competing piece of legislation which would defang the 702 authority by forcing government officials to obtain warrants, how novel, prior to its use. In addition to a number of other reforms that would inhibit warrantless data collection, in Congress, the bill is supported by members of the Congressional Progressive Caucus as well as the right-wing Freedom Caucus, which I just think is so interesting. Anytime you see those two caucuses joining forces, it's probably the right thing to do when it comes to civil liberties. They also say that the House Judiciary Committee's competing bill is also backed by the Electronic Frontier Foundation and the ACLU. And so it's called the Protect Liberty Act. It would actually make real reforms to FISA Section 702 to better protect Americans, to make sure that warrants were required. It would not have this gigantic expansion of the kinds of equipment that can be surveilled. So that's definitely the one that I would advocate for. As I mentioned, this basically got punted, and it's going to be coming up down the road because the Republicans were essentially fighting over which pathway they wanted to take. According to the New York Times, the House scrapped votes on rival bills late Monday, that would narrow the scope of a powerful surveillance tool after an ugly fight broke out among Republicans, likely punting until next year on plans to renew, but also limiting an expiring wiretapping law at the heart of the program. In a hastily organized closed-door meeting, Republican members traded accusations and even expletives as they argued over which of the two measures to overhaul the law, known as Section 702, should be put to the floor. Under the law, the government can conduct warrantless surveillance of foreigners abroad, but also sometimes sweeps in Americans' private messages. I love that they put sometimes, because we're talking about in the millions. The dispute effectively upended Speaker Mike Johnson's plans to have the House vote on both measures this week and send to the Senate whichever one secured a larger majority, a rare move that conservatives vigorously protested. And I love this quote from Thomas Massey. He says, "I've never seen us bring multiple bills at the same time from different committees and put them on the floor and have a beauty pageant." So they couldn't get on the same page about what to do. So it is getting punted down the road. So yeah, that's basically where we're at. But Brad, I think this is really concerning. Per usual, we see the intelligence community and other proponents of, a large government basically saying we have to do this in order to stop terrorists. And I just don't think that tracks whatsoever. The more recent examples I can think of how they've used this is to spy on the Trump campaign wrongfully, spy on Black Lives Matter protesters, spy on January 6 protesters, political donors. I mean, this has been one of the most abused provisions out there.
Yeah, and a lot of the surveillance powers they added under the Patriot Act ended up being used for the drug war. So it's not really, I mean, they always say that national security. If it's really national security at stake, it really shouldn't be that hard to get a warrant. Like, probable cause is not that high a bar to meet. And we can't just give up our liberties in the name of safety and security every time, because that's always what they say. In the United States, I mean, while terrorism is always a threat, the actual amount of lives lost to terrorists since 9/11 is incredibly minuscule, and we already have expansive power. So yeah, I just don't really buy that they need to be able to search Starbucks, Wi-Fi browsing history, what everybody's been looking up, or we're going to have another 9/11 style event. I mean, that's what they say about everything. I don't really find it particularly credible. And it's not like we're even the reform bill you discussed, which sounds pretty sensible to me. It's not like it's taking away their surveillance powers. Just got to get a warrant. And a warrant is not a high bar to get. You just got to have some proof that there's a reason you're looking into this person. And if you don't have that, why are you looking into the person? Why are you trying to search them? I mean, it doesn't seem crazy to me. It really, really doesn't. To just expect the government to get a warrant and to not be able to do all these legal loopholes to backdoor search people all the time without even showing the most basic threshold of why it's necessary.
Well, and what's crazy is that, like you mentioned, they claim that they need this to spy on potential terrorists, right? To spy on foreigners, and that if it happens to catch up Americans in those discussions, like they're not going to target them, that's not part of it, blah, 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 blah. Then why is it so hard for you to get a warrant to go after Americans, right? Like there's no actual logical progression there that makes any sense. If you're not using this to wrongfully spy on and target Americans, then having to get a warrant would not be a big deal. And yet we see them fighting tooth and nail against the House Judiciary's bill and trying to push the Intelligence Committee's bill. And I just think it's, like Michael Lee said, it's a very obvious Trojan horse. The other thing I forgot to note, the good bill that's coming from the Judiciary Committee, it also would close a loophole that currently allows the government to circumvent a ban on buying private data directly from companies and instead using third-party brokers to buy the same data from an indirect source. So it's not getting rid of it. I personally think we probably should get rid of it. I don't really think that it's actually needed. I was racking my brain about this. I mean, what would prohibit them from spying on non-American citizens overseas in the first place? Like, they're not protected by the Constitution in the same way you or I would be. And so it doesn't seem that this is actually even necessary to do what they say they use it for. And I think that regardless, the basic civil rights that are protected by the Constitution trump everything else. They trump everything else. They trump security even, because ultimately, what is security if you don't have freedom? It doesn't matter. So I really do think that this is just a complete hogwash. I don't like the people who are disingenuously propping up the Intelligence Committee's bill. I think they're doing the typical thing and relying on a lot of fear mongering. And it's interesting how their rhetoric and their arguing, their talking points haven't progressed at all since 9/11. I was watching Mike Turner, who's one of the sponsors on the bad bill, and he was saying, we have to have this to stop the terrorists. And basically, if you have nothing to hide, you have nothing to fear. And it's like, I mean, guys, like, this no longer works on people, right? You are so far removed from the culture of where we were when you first got these things through in 2001 or even 2007-8 around FISA, when FISA was passed. But they're still stuck in that timeline, and they don't recognize that those fear-mongering talking points fall flat now. They didn't track. We know what you're actually using this for. Americans aren't stupid. They're figuring it out. So keep a close eye on this. I've tweeted several ways that you can raise your voice on the issue if you want to take action on that. I think that I will definitely be doing so, even though it did get punted for a little bit later on, but I still think it is something to keep your eye on. Okay, well, I want to turn our attention away from politics now and more to, I guess, what I would call politically adjacent subject in the culture. I saw this video just today on Twitter, Brad. It's been making the rounds, and it deals with how few men have a support system. And I want to roll it for you and get your thoughts.
Be honest, who do you call when you are at your lowest? Who is that one person?
Nobody. I'm a man. No one cares.
Not a single soul. Nobody.
No one. Because I'm all alone.
I think I speak for a lot of people when I say I don't call anyone.
Nobody. I'm a guy. Nobody gives a shit.
Speaking for the guys when I say this, literally no one.
Do y'all call someone?
Nobody. Just nobody. Got no one to talk to. So nobody.
No one. I'm a man. No one cares.
No one. Not a single fucking person.
I wouldn't call anyone. I wouldn't turn to a single person on this earth because they don't care. They will just find a way to use it against me one day.
We can call somebody? I just thought nobody gave a fuck because I was a man.
Yeah, so I had mixed feelings about this. Part of me absolutely does think that men and loneliness is a real problem. I mean, loneliness is a problem for all people, but I think men especially have fewer emotional connections and close relationships in their lives. And they're also, I think, told to suppress their feelings more by our culture. And so I think this is a real thing. At the same time, I do kind of inherently reject the presentation of some of these men as helpless, in that this is just how society is now. I have no one I can talk to. I don't know. It's harder than it once was, but you can still make an effort to form meaningful relationships and develop and reach out to people and open up. And I do think it's hard sometimes. I do think it requires thinking deeply about what masculinity really means to you, and if some of the baggage you have attached to it needs to be left behind. But I'm of two minds of this. On one, I think obviously men are experiencing loneliness at very high rates, especially in our new digital era and with the kind of decline of old school civil institutions that bonded people and helped them make friends, like church and like in-person education and in-person work and these kinds of things that have enormous upsides. I'm a huge fan of remote work, but obviously has downsides as well. Yet I also do see a lot of the conversation about the male loneliness epidemic framed around like woe is men, and there's a degree of helplessness that seeps into it in terms of, well, men these days are just left adrift. And I think that's also not true. Like if you truly have no one in your life, unless there's just been incredibly unfortunate circumstances, that's partly a function of you not putting yourself out there enough. I'm not saying society makes it easy, but it's also partly a function of your own choices and actions. So yeah, I'm kind of two minds on it.
I entirely agree with you on that. It's an old Stoic saying, if you want to make a friend, be a friend. And so I think that I don't feel sorry for men in this situation. I do put some blame on them for it. That being said, I have compassion for men in this situation because I do think it is a growing epidemic. I think it is extremely harmful to men to operate under the belief system that many of the men expressed in this video. And it's not just this video, right? I've seen these kinds of sentiments expressed all over the internet by men. The studies, the numbers range, but I've seen something like 1 in 5 men have no close friends whatsoever. And I think that the reasons we should care about that are not just on an interpersonal level. Of course, we should care about people, period. But these are the kinds of things that do creep into society. They creep into the zeitgeist. They influence the culture, and ultimately they influence politics. We do know that for men under age 50, suicide is the biggest killer. Like, that is awful to me. We know men are so much less likely to seek mental health care help. And I have a lot of men in my life I care about. Obviously you, I have my brothers, my dad, like I have tons of good guy friends. Like that, it makes me want to cry. Like it kills me to think that any of them would feel like that, and thankfully I think I work pretty hard to make sure that they don't. I reach out a lot. I try to call them, but it's interesting. I've talked to my mom about it for a while, and I'm like, my brothers don't call me. Like every time I call them, they answer, they want to chat, but like they don't reach out. They're not as likely to just, make the effort in that way. And I think there is a lot of that where men they just don't make the effort. And so they end up becoming very lonely. I also think there is sort of what we would call toxic masculinity culture, right? Where men are expected to always just be tough and not show emotion and like not need anything. And that sucks. That's no way to live your life. I think people need community. I know I do. Loneliness is awful. I've been lonely many, many times in my life, even in recent years. Yeah, I moved to a whole new city 2 years ago. It's tough being lonely. It's tough not knowing a lot of people. It's tough not having a community. But when I have found myself in those circumstances, I have to make an effort. I have to put myself out there. I have to actually work to make friends and join community groups and join churches and volunteer and just find ways to connect with people who have similar interests as me. And I've definitely found that to be true, that when you do that and you make the effort and you just show up as a friend to people, it will be reciprocated. So I guess my message on this is two-front as well. One, I think men have to do the work. But secondarily, I think we have to get past this mentality, especially amongst men, that this is okay, that this is no big deal. I actually shared this on Twitter today, and the engagement I've gotten has been really interesting. Like, I've had sort of a wide range of men replying to it. Some of them saying, this is absolutely accurate, and I'm so glad that I've formed these relationships, and here's how I went about doing it. Others saying, like, I don't really need anybody. I'm totally fine. Like, there's nothing toxic about this. So it really ranges how men react to this. I'm really curious for our listeners to weigh in and let us know what their thoughts are. But I think that that's inaccurate if you fall in the latter camp. I do think you need people, even in the Bible, which is largely metaphorical. But at the beginning of Genesis, God creates Adam and then says it's not good for him to be alone. Like, he needs companionship. He needs a partner, and he creates Eve, right? And I think that that's still true in our society. And I think if we had more of that, we would have a richer social fabric, because we need men. We need masculinity. We need that in our social fabric. But men can't rise to their full potential if they are so isolated as this. And then consequentially, when you have a lot of men who are isolated and lonely and who feel this way, that society just doesn't care about them and that they're worthless, that can lead to violence, right? Not only against themselves, which I mentioned in the suicide numbers, but also in society. Men are much more likely to commit violence against others, especially against women, against their significant others. And so I think that this is, you see sort of a ripple effect out of this throughout our culture and political system. So guys, if you don't have friends, make some friends. It's not weak. It's not soft. You need friends. You need people to lean on. And honestly, you need people besides just your partner to lean on, because one person can't be your whole community.
It is hard, though, to make friends as an adult. I've noticed that a lot of people's friends as adults go back to college or go back to high school even, or go back to work in some way. But it is hard to just make friends as an adult if you move to a new city and you don't know anyone and you have a remote job. So it's possible if you really put yourself out there, but I do have compassion for them, because it's not easy. Especially, I think it's probably, I guess I don't really know, but I would guess it's probably easier for women. But to put yourself out there as a guy and try to make friends with another guy, like, there is something where you don't have that built in through a sports team or through college or through an office situation or anything. There's definitely something difficult about doing that these days.
Actually, I love that you point this out, because you're right. Like, this is part of like the culture being toxic, right? And like not finding better ways to support men. And I can't remember who said this to me. I think it was my friend Dylan a number of years ago. But he said, like, as me as a guy, if I try to go make friends, like, women will think I'm hitting on them. Men will think I'm hitting on them. Like, how do you actually just approach somebody? It's like, hey, I want to be your friend. And it made me laugh. But I really think he was right on that in some aspects. Like, it is easier for women. Absolutely. We're not a threat. We don't come across necessarily as being romantically interested. Like, you don't have that built-in sort of expectation the woman's hitting on you. So it is a little bit easier. But I will say, like, I'm obviously very outgoing and pretty gregarious as a person. And I've struggled since being in Atlanta. One thing I started doing a number of years ago is, like, instead of waiting for people to invite me to do things, I just started hosting things. So I started hosting a monthly salon at my house for a while. And I would invite anybody I knew, which at the time was like maybe 15 people. And most of that was like online political connections. But I would say, like, bring friends, like, bring other people that maybe would like this. And so I would meet other people through that, or I would host like holiday parties and say the same thing. And then I started like trying to sort of foster relationships with people I just encountered that I liked. Like, my hairstylist I really liked. And so I would ask her to like grab drinks after, some other time when we weren't actually doing a hair appointment, things like that. And that over time has started to build. But yeah, it takes actually a concerted effort, and it's not easy. And it's kind of like dating. Like you might meet somebody that you think you're going to hit it off with, and then you get together and you're like, maybe not so much. So it's a little bit trial and error. But
well, a little bit. I actually have something interesting to say about this. It's especially hard to make friends as a gay guy, who everyone knows is gay, with men, because they really do think you're hitting on them. And even if they know you're partnered up, well, that doesn't really mean you wouldn't be hitting on them. Unfortunately, there are a lot of open relationships in the gay community. That's increasingly a thing in straight relationships too, but I would say is probably more common among gay men. But that's certainly not my situation. But it's like, so it's very hard to make friends with men and have them not. A lot of them are also presumptuous. It's like, yeah, Kevin, don't flatter yourself. But yeah, it can be hard because to reach out to them or seem interested in them, it's like, oh, and they get very awkward. They're also so it's very interesting. I had this little back and forth recently with these YouTubers, Abba and Preach, who are this big YouTube account, and I think I told you about this, but they made a video and they were reacting to me and they were watching my video and they were like, "You think he's gay?" And they were talking about, and they got the vibe from me and they guessed correctly. Right. But then one of them was joking and he was like, because that jawline is making me gay. And I was like, I was like, okay, I love that you're actually comfortable with your heterosexuality. Right. Because the idea of someone being gay and you're like saying, oh, he's good looking doesn't make you feel like oh, am I seeming gay right now? Oh, like it doesn't. But a lot of men do have that kind of insecurity or fragility. So especially then if you're trying to be friends with them and they know you're gay, that's very tough for them. So yeah, I don't know. It's an interesting situation. Men making friends in general, but then specifically the subplot of gay men making friends. But I guess it's easier for gay men to make friends with women, though. That's the flip side of it, because they know you're not like trying to hit on them or sleep with them or anything. So pluses and minuses to everything.
Well, I think on a final note, what I'll say is, the loneliness epidemic is by far worse with men, but it's not exclusive to men. There are a lot of lonely people out there, period. And I think there are a lot of people who say they wish they had more friends. They wish they had deeper relationships with friends. And even when you do have good friends, as your lives sort of take different courses, it can be hard to keep up with those friends. And they, a lot of my friends who got married and have kids, like, they can't just go on a trip with me anymore, right? You can't just up and leave your baby when you have a baby. It's very different. So I'm always interested in finding people who are kind of on a similar path as me or just in a similar place in life as me. So I would say put yourself out there, make the effort. If you're lonely, probably other people around you are lonely too. And, what do you have to lose? Absolutely nothing. All right, let's move on to our hot takes. Brad, what do you have this week? I haven't been spicy lately. I know. I've been like, I don't know what I've been doing. I have one. People have no idea how hard we struggle. I have a good one. I don't know if it's controversial, but I think it is. Okay.
All right. Okay, my hot take is that I've never had flavored water that isn't disgusting. So anytime you have one of these things with zero sugar, yeah, like whatever you just held up is probably disgusting. And then it has fake sugar in it, and it's just like 0 calories, 0 sugar, and it tastes like cancer, right? It tastes like Diet Coke, but with that weird fake sugary sweetness. I find it disgusting and nauseating. And I don't know why people don't just drink water or drink something with flavor. Pick one.
Because water is disgusting and we don't want the calories. But I do like that you say it tastes like cancer, because I was about to acknowledge I fully understand I'm going to get cancer from this. There's no way it tastes this good, has 0 calories, and is actually healthy for me. No chance. But yeah, I drink all kinds of flavored water because I hate the taste of real water. It's disgusting. Which could it be a ton?
What? Tastes like nothing.
No, it tastes bad. Tastes really bad.
I don't know what crusty ass Atlanta water you're drinking, but
I don't even drink faucet water.
Get a Brita filter.
I have one, and I have like bottled water. It all tastes bad. The only way water tastes good is if you put like a lot of lemon and like artificial sweetener in it. So, yeah, I hate it. It's gross. Or like, you can get like what are they called? Like Ultima, the electrolyte kind of sweeteners. Those are pretty good. Yeah, I don't like it. That's not my hot take though. My hot take is that matching Christmas pajamas are cool. And I don't understand people who dunk on them. My family does matching Christmas PJs every year. I have so many pairs of Christmas jammies. It's insane. I could almost wear like a different pair every day of December. I love it. It's one of my favorite traditions that we have. I don't even understand men who complain. Like my brothers and dad, they'll tell you that it's like all me and the girls, but don't be fooled. They love their Christmas jammies too. I think it's a great tradition. My only real hang up is they don't ever offer like matching Christmas jammies for pets. And I think that they should, because wouldn't it be so funny if Phoenix was in Christmas jammies with us? Like, I would die.
I mean, you could get an extra pair of the pajamas and then cut a piece to make a bandana out of or something.
But we go kind of expensive. Like, we get Victoria's Secret pajamas, so they're like $70, $80. I don't think my mom's
And Phoenix isn't worth that to you?
He is, but not to
You want to know?
Up.
All right, so here's an unrelated little thing. Do you know that some couples or some dog owners, before they get a dog, agree upon an amount that if the healthcare expenses of that dog exceed that amount, they will simply euthanize it?
What?
Now, that's not as evil as it sounds, because unfortunately, and I've talked about this with my boyfriend, who obviously is a doctor, veterinary science is nowhere near as developed as actual medicine for humans. So a lot of the treatments, like if your dog gets cancer or something, a lot of the treatments are very expensive and have low rates of working. So a lot of people will... I don't know if you can get insurance for your pet. You might be, but I don't know. But
it's $50 a month.
I don't. I don't have insurance on Reggie. But my response was, okay, the limit is whatever the maximum credit a bank would give me on all of my assets. That's the limit.
How much is my kidney worth? Like, I would do anything for Phoenix. Are you kidding me? That is insane.
Well, and I sparked a little controversy on Twitter because I've been looking into cloning Reggie, which would cost $50,000, but you can fully clone your dog, and they've developed the technology to the point where there's no health. They don't have worse health outcomes. That used to be the case. They wouldn't live as long. They'd be sickly. No worse health outcomes. It's just expensive because you have to have a surrogate and do like IVF, and they have to do like make the zygote and all this stuff. And only, of course, one company has a monopoly on it in America. So they charge $50K minimum.
I thought cloning was banned.
What?
I thought cloning was banned.
Cloning humans is banned. No, cloning humans is banned.
Shut up.
Not cloning animals. Some countries ban cloning animals, but the United States, I read up all about this. I spent probably half an hour just reading stuff about this. And I like jokingly tweeted, how do I convince my boyfriend to let me spend $50K on it? And look, I probably would never do it because there are so many dogs that just need to be adopted. And there's so many better ways to spend $50,000. But part of me also, like, I adopted Reggie later on in his life, and I would love to have him as a puppy. And I know it would be like a different dog. It would almost be like a son, because a lot of what your dog is their experiences and behavioral. But so I guess some people are like, it would be unethical to do this. And I'm not sure I really buy that. No. I think it would be wasteful and extra. But you know what? Some people have a midlife crisis and waste $100,000 on a car or whatever. Maybe my midlife crisis will be cloning my dog.
Honestly, I would do it in a second. You know, I've been like crying about the fact Phoenix will die since the day I got him. And I almost didn't neuter him because I thought about breeding him just to have like part of his genetics live on, because he's such a great dog. Like, he's only one. He's already the best dog I've ever known. He's going to be like a Lassie type dog. Like, he is just one of a kind. He's extraordinary. Although he is all of a sudden afraid of going upstairs right now. And I'm carrying the 65-pound dog upstairs like on the regular. So I don't love that fact. But aside from that,
well,
like,
Reggie's so old that he started to fall when he goes down the stairs. We have very slippery stairs.
Wait, is Reggie considered a medium-sized dog? Because I was on Maria Bartiramo's show yesterday, and she briefly mentioned this. I haven't had time to look into it. But I guess the FDA is about to approve a drug for medium to large-sized dogs that can extend their life. Yeah.
I'll be buying that drug.
I know. You need to Google
so
it.
yes, he's a medium-sized dog.
Okay, he could qualify then. That's exciting.
Yeah, he's been falling down the stairs because they're very slippery. And so I've started carrying him up and down the stairs with me.
Yeah, he's not 65 pounds and physically larger than you. Like Phoenix is like my height on my legs. Like it's insane. Next time you come to my house, I'm gonna have one of those like wheelchair accessible kind of like lifts going up and down my stairs. I'm pretty sure for Phoenix because I don't know.
I was saying we should install one of those for Reggie, but I don't think he would use it. I don't think he would like it.
I don't know, but I'm going to blow my back out if this keeps it up. So hopefully it stops. But yeah, I'm all for blowing whatever amount of money I could. Me at the gym. This is my gym now. I'm carrying Phoenix up and down the stairs. Gonna be jacked before we know it. All right, guys, that's a wrap. Leave us a comment. Let us know your thoughts on everything we discussed today. We hope you're having a happy holiday season. Don't forget, share the podcast with somebody you know. Leave us a comment. Subscribe on YouTube. Rate us on Apple. Give us 5 stars. Oh, that does so much to help promote the show. We love you to death for doing it. And until next week, stay based.